helped on the primary, and I guess I was,
Well, you've got somebody.
competent. I can't tell you.
Jeff.
It is Jeff. I thought it was, I was going to guess Jeff, and then I said maybe it's a voter.
Jeff's a voter. I hope he is.
Has anybody signed in?
It's us.
I don't think it's going to be anybody.
That's what we were just saying. Are we doing a sign in here beyond what happens out there? Do you have a sign in for?
Well, Donna is.
Oh, here we go, right
Didn't
there.
have all these COVID things.
What is
Right.
the sign in there?
But there's a sign-in sheet there. I didn't bother. You guys should sign
It's
it.
an individual one. It refers to your symptoms.
Yeah, I did that.
Right, that's the COVID one, but this, if this
We
is
should fill out this, shouldn't I?
probably.
So Jeff, at any point, you know, when the screen, when I change screens, you got the, I said, when I have it up there. if you
George
want to-
McNaughton.
If you want to comment on it, just jump right in. Okay? I don't want to talk the whole time. Just, you know, I'll start saying some things and it's whatever.
There's nothing anybody logs in.
No, but you got to get it on. You got to get it recorded so it'll be rebroadcast. We have 12 hours. They can rebroadcast it.
These are a few of your favorites.
Hello.
I've already done that over and over.
Good evening, George.
So you got it memorized.
I like your office.
George is
Public
here.
hearing.
Thank you.
George is here. Comes
Great
somebody.
improvement on the iPad in the armchair.
Oh, you didn't like looking at the ceiling?
Yeah, there is
Your
a lot of
bookshelves,
time
the
for
door
them to
frame.
rebroadcast this because it holds over.
Are you enjoying your new digs?
Yes.
Good, good. It's a nice location.
Yep.
We're just waiting on the production getting worked out, so they're working with SAPA to see
It doesn't matter.
what they'll see on the big screen and what the moderator will be able to do.
I'll probably be standing
I can sit down.
Sure. Three minutes to start time, folks.
I know. Has that been typical?
I should have remembered from the candidates forum, it was boiling hot then. You wore a sweater too, I wore a
Can
sweater,
I sit
but
here so I can
Yes.
see the screen?
You're
there?
fine.
Well, if you're just going to stand up, I figure it doesn't matter.
luckily we won't be here long, but it's hot.
Thank you.
And you're keeping these in everybody, right?
They have to go in a folder. I have that.
So we,
at work.
I need to want to know
Have you lost weight, Jeff?
Plus, I'll have
Yeah.
You look good.
Look at more, no, well, I'm diabetic, so my whole diet
if
and
somebody
lifestyle
comes in,
changed.
I left
And my A1C in June 12th, when I got diagnosed, was 8.
the door is open?
yes,
When I, and
John taped
when I
the
went
door.
back, it's 5.1.
Yeah.
Well, I'm taking metformin.
Less than 7, yeah?
Metformin, but also I've just changed my whole diet, and I go for walks. So,
Who's that? Somebody's on.
so I'm down at
Oh, that's Steve
Steve
Ancuda.
Ancuda. So anyway, I've lost about 40 pounds,
That's a lot of weight.
Looks good, and
and I'm still overweight. Boy, I must have been really fat.
those weight comparison charts are meant for Africans, I think. They're a lot thinner than we are.
Now, if I lose 5 more pounds, I will have lost 20% of my body weight. The thing is, I'm not trying to lose weight now. This is just eating what I'm supposed to eat, not eating what I'm not supposed to eat. But I don't really exercise. I go for walks, but I don't really exercise. So I'm not, losing weight's not my goal. I mean, my goal is to eat well so I don't have problems with diabetes.
And that's, do you need medicine, or has that been enough?
Just the metformin.
Good for you. Yeah.
Do you need a pen? I thought you were looking for a pen.
No. He is excellent. Right around the corner.
Well, I can't work out in the gym.
Why not?
I tried it once and it was boring. I can't do it, it's boring.
He's telling you what to do.
I don't want him to tell me what to do. I want to be outside where it's nice. No, I went to the other guy, the guy you bought it from,
Yeah.
and he was great. I don't want to be in there on the equipment. I want to be out walking in the woods.
No, okay, no, that's different,
1 minute, folks.
different ways about
I-
it. To me, I like being somebody, I just want somebody to tell me what to do.
Is the top person Brian on the left?
Top person on the left is Walter.
Oh, okay,
He's just out of camera.
all right,
Step in the camera, Walter, that's you.
all righty.
Oh, there's Dick. Hi, Dick.
Can't tell you whether he can hear you or not.
Yeah, Sharon said she'd be in. Lori said she'd be joining.
Are you muted, Walter? Can you see?
Doesn't look too busy.
Yeah, Walter is muted. Looks like a little.
Can you hear us okay, Richard?
No, Walter.
No, you gotta unmute.
No, I have to stay,
Oh. What about mine? I'm not,
Jared said that feedback.
oh, right. So will they be able to? Can you hear me?
No,
That's the
you're
important
muted.
thing. It's 7 o'clock. Can we start this meeting? I don't know if we're starting. Here we go. There we are in the middle. Okay. It's 7 o'clock. Here we go. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock. This public hearing is called to order. I'm the presiding officer, Larry Kraft, your town moderator. As stipulated in the warrant for special town meeting and notice of public hearing dated September 28, quote, there will be a public hearing on Monday, November 2nd, 2020 at 7 p.m. in the Park Street School for the purpose of discussing the presented article, which I will read in a moment. In addition to attending in person, interested parties are also participating by Zoom, and SAPA TV is filming the proceedings. The procedures for tonight's meeting are that Robert's Rules of Order govern the meeting or the hearing. No action may take place at this hearing. It is for information only. After a presentation by the Charter Review Committee, I will entertain questions and comments. Please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. State your name clearly, and please limit your remarks only to the matter at hand. In the interest of fairness, everyone who wants to speak will have an opportunity to do so before I recognize a speaker for the second time. The article under consideration is as follows. Shall the town vote to propose to the General Assembly of the State of Vermont an amendment to the town charter as set forth in 24 VSA Appendix Chapter 149 by striking all of the enacting clauses and inserting in lieu thereof the comprehensive revision and amendment to the town charter signed by the Select Board on July 20, 2020. The text of said amendment to be as is filed with the town clerk and is presented at the public hearings warned and held by the Select Board on August 24, 2020 and September 14, 2020. All as required pursuant to the provisions of 17 VSA Chapter 55 and the Town Charter. Said text subject to revision is made by the Select Board and as a result of the public hearings consistent with 17 VSA 2645. Complete text of amendment is posted in voting booths and is available upon request from the town clerk or on the town's website. By Australian ballot, the ballot box will be open at 8 a.m. and will close at 7 p.m. We're going to begin the hearing with a presentation from the Charter Review Committee.
I'm Walter Marcone, I'm a member of the Charter Review Committee, and also the chair of the Select Board. And I also have with me Jeff Modis, who is the chair of the Charter Review Committee, Vaughn, who is a member of the Charter Review Committee, and we have a member of the Charter Review Committee members joining us via Zoom. We have Dick Andrews, who's the Charter Committee, Sharon Iyer, process that we've gone through is we started the charter review back in April of 2016. 11 members were appointed to a committee. They spent 8 months going through the charter line by line. It was presented to the voters in March at town meeting, March of 2017. It passed. Voters with a
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Christie, you have a question?
Yes, if somebody's trying to give an explanation, we're not hearing anything.
Oh, you can't, Walter, you can't hear the presentation?
Correct.
Walter,
agree
would you
with
please
Christie.
speak into a microphone?
Oh, here you go. You can use this one here.
That's for you.
Yeah, but I won't need to be speaking while you're speaking, so you can have it.
That's true. I could just give
Oh,
this
you got
back to
that
Jeff.
one going? Okay.
Yeah, I'll just give it to Jeff.
I didn't see
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay.
Sir.
So, the Charter Committee was appointed in April of 2016. It spent 8 months going through the charter line by line, word by word. It was presented to the voters at the town meeting in March of 2017. It passed with a vote of 931 to 317, almost 3-1. However, in the current charter, it says in order to pass a charter amendment, you must have 25% of the registered voters voting in the election. We only got 19.6%. The charter also says that before you present the same amendments or similar amendments for another vote, you have to wait 3 years to try again. So that's why it's taken so long. So the Charter Committee was reconstituted October of 2019, spent another 6 months working on reviewing the changes and refining it even more. So this has been gone through and had a lot of very aggressive review. Just some general changes throughout the whole charter. The capitalization and titles have been standardized. In the former charter, they used different kinds of capitalization, and the titles were not always consistent. The terminology was changed to be gender neutral throughout the entire charter. In the past, everything was referred to as men or man. The language has been modernized. There were some terms that were used 35 years ago that really aren't in common use right now. Consistency of statutory references. It's been reviewed against state statute to make sure that there are no conflicts. Removal of obsolete provisions. There were some things in the charter that really don't have effect anymore. For example, there was a transition procedure from when the charter was first enacted. Well, that was dealt with already, and so therefore it's no longer relevant. Days, when they referred to days, we made it clear that we're talking about calendar days. Also, eliminate all duplication with state statute. If something is already articulated and in effect under state statute, there was no reason to repeat it in the charter. So, first of all, starting with Article 1, which deals with incorporation, general law, and miscellaneous provisions. These are the significant changes that were made. Power to adopt ordinances to address blight was added for select boards, for the select board to be able to adopt these ordinances so that we can fight blight in town. We were also asking for the ability to adopt additional powers that are provided in the charters of other municipalities. For example, the Rutland Charter has the ability to create a redevelopment agency to help with housing in high-density residential areas. Not something that we're doing right now, nor do we feel we need to add it at this point, but at some future point, we may want to add that. So this would allow us to add that power if we take it to the Springfield voters and the Springfield voters approve it. What this is really doing, though, is it's meaning that we don't have to take it to the state legislature. It means just the Springfield town voters can approve adding these additional powers. There were a number of clarifications of the ordinance adoption process and also the effective dates. This language was kind of confusing in the existing charter. There were a number of different interpretations, and it wasn't very clear. So what we did was we put very clarifying language in there. The same thing is true with the emergency ordinance adoption process. It also made clear how many select board members are required in order to pass an adoption process, etc. So, continuing on with Article 1. It enables us to do electronic publication and codification of the ordinances. The old charter was before people were using the internet and before all these things were being done electronically. So we're taking it into the electronic age. We also added a provision for ordinance enforcement to allow for injunctive relief, which means that if we are pursuing enforcement of an ordinance, we can actually ask the courts to demand or to require enforcement of an ordinance. Mr. McNaughton, did you want to add anything to that? Did I explain it okay?
I think you did a pretty good job, Walter.
Okay, thank you. We had a lot of information in the old charter, probably 2, maybe 3 pages, dealing with open meetings and the freedom of information and the Vermont Open Meeting Law. This is a provision in state statute that has changed quite a bit, and it continues to evolve and change. The information we had was old, was not up to date, was not relevant, so basically we now, in our charter, just refer to the state statute. This way we are always operating under the most current requirements that are set forth by the state of Vermont. The same thing is true with conflict of interest. Something like that has evolved and changed, and so what we've done is we are now requiring, instead of the conflict of interest being detailed in the charter, we're going to have the select board adopt and continuously update a conflict of interest policy for the town. Continuing with Article 1, we detailed out the acquisition or disposition of town property policy so that in the future the select board has to have a current policy on these provisions. If I recall correctly, the charter was only dealing with the acquisition or only with the disposition, but not so much the acquisition of it. So it just seemed like something was missing. So now we're requiring that a policy be in effect. Emergency powers, and this became very relevant when with this whole COVID pandemic crisis. Again, clarifying, making sure it's real clear on how many select board members must be present and voting, and how many have to vote in the affirmative in order to declare a public emergency. The charter revision and amendment is something that we also wanted to deal with because, as you've seen, we have a hard time coming up with the 25% voters in order to do anything with the charter. So in the future, if we would like to be able to amend the charter, we're changing it so that we don't have to have the full 25% of the voters in place in order to enact further amendments. Then there were some
We should note,
Yes.
Is there a
we
comment?
should note here
Mr. McNaughton.
that this is going to get even more difficult. One of the inadvertent impacts of the fact that whenever an 18-year-old registers for his license or her driver's license, they automatically can get registered to vote. That means that the more people that get registered to vote, if the same number of people normally vote, it's going to become increasingly difficult to reach 25%, because, you know, when you do the math, the more people there are, the greater the percentage is. And if you have this basically the same number of people voting all the time, it's going to get more and more difficult to reach that 25%. At some point, it might become basically functionally impossible to amend the charter.
Thank you, Mr. McNaughton. Back to Walter.
Okay, I mentioned kind of in the opening comments about these transitional procedures. There's a whole section in the charter here, if like a page that talks about, it basically presumes that this is the first time a charter is being adopted. And therefore, it talks about the continuation.
Mr. Moderator, the microphone seems to be failing.
Thank you for that point of order.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
There's about a page in the old charter that talks about these transitional procedures, and it basically assumes that this is the very first charter, that there wasn't a charter that preceded it. And it talks about, the continuation of existing departments and incumbents in office continuing. So these were all things that are no longer relevant because we're continuing on from charter to charter. So now I believe we move to Article 2. So one of the things that a lot of people felt strongly about was that why do we start town meeting at 7:30? Wouldn't it make more sense if we just started at an even time at 7 o'clock? It might make it easier for people in general. So we made that change. Again, looking towards the fact that we're now in an electronic age, we can do our posting of meetings on the town website, in addition to posting at a number of physical facilities. That will continue, but this gives us another way of getting the word out. This item on town budget revote. Let me just get myself to that section. So basically, the language here was very confusing before. It talks about if a revote on the town budget would only happen if it's voted in the negative, or if it's voted in the affirmative at an election having a turnout of less than 15% of the registered voters at the time of town meeting. We just simplified it to say, basically, the town budget shall be subject to a revote only if voted in the negative. So if the budget's voted down, then we have a revote for it. Okay, continuing on, we've eliminated some positions that some elected positions that we have had a lot of difficulty in filling, and that includes the listers. We haven't been getting people willing to run for the lister position, so we've had to either appoint or sometimes we've contracted the service out. The first constable, we have redefined the position of first constable to also include a number of code enforcement activities. And therefore, we felt it was more appropriate that that be moved to an appointed position as opposed to an elected position. We've added elected positions that weren't included in the charter, but we've been electing them from year to year. And that's the library trustees. I don't know how long, but for quite a while, we have an elected library board, but it wasn't referred to in the charter. So we made sure that was put in there. And we also added something about attendance to assume, to basically saying that all elected officials are expected to attend all meetings of the public bodies of which they are members. So basically, we're trying to set forth that this is something that you should anticipate if you're going for elected office, that you are expected to attend all the meetings. So continuing with Article 2, it was not clear in the charter. It just said that you needed to be a duly qualified voter, which no one was quite sure exactly what that meant or how you'd enforce that. So we decided it would be better just to say, must be a registered voter if you want to run and hold public office. We tried to also clarify the language of what happens when there is a vacancy in elected office, how you declare the vacancy, and how you refill the vacancy. Because the Library Board of Trustees was something that was added, we provided a definition of that because it was something that was new. And we also provided a definition of the trustees of public funds. It was kind of just standing out there all by itself. Not everybody understood that. Jeff, would you like to elaborate on that at all? No? I said enough? Now we get to appointed officers, and this is a place where, in some committees, there's been some question about the requirements for attending meetings or not. So we decided to actually build in a requirement. And the requirement is that if an appointed official misses 3 consecutive regularly scheduled meetings, then the chair of that committee should report that fact that somebody has missed those meetings to the select board, and then the select board can determine whether there's good reason why that happened or whether the position should be declared vacant. Some of the committees, in some instances, may have trouble even having quorums because people have not been showing up for meetings. Okay, continuing on with Article 2. So we have a number of appointed officials that we no longer, sometimes we nominally fill the position, but we never use the position. The position doesn't do anything. We don't, there's no reason to have it in here. We have no need for them. And that includes the wearer of coal. As you can see, some of these are really kind of old things that happened way, way back when these things might have been more relevant. Fence viewers, surveyor of wood and lumber, and grand juror. But we did add, as I mentioned earlier, the town constable as an appointed position. And then we also defined that position. Okay, continuing on. We also wanted to make it clear that appointed officials must be registered voters, and also that appointed boards, people who are appointed to boards, must be registered voters, and we made 2 exceptions. One was the airport, and one is the housing authority. And we did that because both of those boards really have more of a regional perspective, and they have certain specific requirements for membership on their boards, generally technical requirements, and therefore we wanted to just make sure that we were able to get the best qualified people on those boards. Okay, that's it for Article 2. So we're halfway through the charter at this point.
Walter, before you get to Article 3.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Yeah, one other thing that we changed in order to make the charter more usable and to help the efficient functioning of government is, and I believe it's in Article 2, that we removed the setting of the grand list date as of January 1st. And by removing the January 1st date in the charter, we now fall under state law, which is April 1st. To this point, there's been a conflict between charter date of January 1st and state date of April 1st, which becomes a real issue with properties change hands or change statuses between between January and April 1st. So by removing the January 1st, we remove that conflict with the state. So that's another example of how we tried to make the charter more efficient for running the town government. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll continue the presentation from Walter.
Okay, Article 3. We went through the town manager requirements and appointment and removal, what happens when there's a vacancy. Some of these things were kind of muddy and needed clarification. We also recognized that one important change was, and we did recently go through a recruitment process for town manager, that the requirement that within 6 months that they be a resident of the town of Springfield, could be an impediment. And I know that there were some people who had to withdraw their applications because of that. And the reasoning behind the discussion that went back and forth about this was it's important that they be close to Springfield, but in this day and age, you've got a lot of families with 2 working spouses, and oftentimes they want to be between the 2 locations of where their jobs are to make commuting easier. They also could be from a neighboring community and have children in school, and oftentimes, they're very satisfied with that arrangement. They want to be able to keep them in school. So what we did was said they had to be a resident of Vermont. And they also may be required, and that's totally up to the select board, but if the select board felt that, for example, that they lived in Vermont, but they lived too far away, the select board could institute a requirement of moving into town. So it's not like this requirement is completely gone, it just makes it a little bit more discretionary. And it also gave a little bit more broad authority to the select board as to how they evaluate the town manager. So for example, there was some very prescribed things listed in the charter, and basically this will allow us, it basically says that we can also use commonly used evaluation practices in town management profession. I think it was realized that a lot of the things that we had in there were antiquated. And there's a lot more current information available that is continuously evolving. The whole management of municipalities and everything is something where there's been a lot more research done, there's been a lot more information and tools that have been developed. So this gives us the ability to use those.
The other major change that we made for the town, or we are recommending, is for the appointment of the town manager to be for a fixed term, not fewer than 2 years or not more than 5 years, as opposed to an indefinite appointment. And we felt like this is an important change to make, especially in Vermont, where the employees have property rights to their position. And there's a whole protocol that you have to follow in order to remove an employee. And by setting a fixed term, you could actually set you're not locked into somebody forever before this process could be started. So we felt it was important to set a fixed term to perhaps ease a transition, as someone might be coming to the end of a term as town manager.
Okay, continuing on. Administrative code clarifications. Basically, we've been required to adopt an administrative code every 10 years, I believe it is. And this is supposed to be the compilation of all the ordinances, all the zoning rules and regulations, all the charter itself, basically all those things that govern the town. I know a number of policies are also included in there too. We have been refining that process. We actually just went through a full recodification of everything, and we've been able to automate the whole thing, put it on the town's website so it's searchable. So basically we're recognizing that that process and everything has changed, and we're able to do it better and more effectively, and we're able to do it electronically now. So, human resources. Let me just find that section here. So again, we were using kind of old language that we don't use anymore. Like, for example, with human resources, we were calling it the personnel system, but it's actually much broader than that. So we really are encompassing it more by calling it Human Resources Department. The Merit System Ordinance included a lot of language that really is preempted by negotiated contracts in the collective bargaining process. So basically, we've eliminated that entire personnel merit system ordinance requirement. Adopting the ordinances, often the different negotiated contracts have different negotiated provisions, and putting it in the charter, you really can't anticipate all the changes that happen every 2-3 years when these contracts are renegotiated. So therefore, we're deferring to the contracts that are negotiated on this. Let's see. We want to clarify that the Select Board will have the sole authority to enter into collective bargaining agreements, and may commit the town to collective bargaining agreements which shall have control over conflicting rules and regulations promulgated pursuant to this charter. So the collective bargaining agreements are basically what rules for personnel who are covered by those provisions. Okay, we're off to the last article, budgets and finance. And I'm sure that Jeff will want to chime in on this one. So basically, the language throughout this article has been modernized. And it also recognizes that we do things a little bit differently than we did 35 years ago. So we've basically updated what the procedures are and the flow of how things happen, et cetera. And again, just to kind of change the language so it made more sense. A lot of things were just, the language was such that you'd have to read it 3 or 4 times, and even so, 2 different people reading it might come up with 2 different interpretations. So we wanted to make sure things were really, really clear. So, oops, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Excuse me one moment as I resume the... I'm sorry, now we have to jump ahead. Since I've retired, I have not done a PowerPoint presentation, so it's been 12 years. So, okay, reserve funds clarified. You want to take a shot at this one? I think you can explain it better than I can.
In the current charter, the select board has the authority to create reserve funds only for very specific purposes, primarily for equipment funds and other capital purposes. We've broadened this so that the select board has the authority to create reserve funds for any special purpose to ensure the efficient operation of government. And where that change came about is we have, the town has a liability right now for retirement of employees that we can't cover. And we started a reserve fund, but we're not really authorized in the charter to start that reserve fund. So by adding in the power for the select board to broaden the power so that they can start a reserve fund for any specific special purpose to ensure the efficient functioning of government, we've given the power to the select board to do what they're already doing, but wasn't already previously articulated in the charter.
So when we were working on the charter, John Bond was not a member of the select board. He was actually the chair of last year's Budget Advisory Committee. So he was able to give us a great deal of insight about how the Budget Advisory can and should work and can better work. And as a result of that and discussion, we've made a number of changes to clarify the composition of the committee and also what its role, and to make sure that they had the tools to do their job in a timely manner. So that includes making sure they've gotten copies of materials in a more timely manner and had adequate opportunity to make their report to the select board and things such as that. Anything you want to add about that, John?
No, thank you, Walter. I think that covers it.
Okay, audit report and findings presented at select board meeting. So actually, this was something that came up at the last town meeting where we were unable to include in the annual report that came out at town meeting a copy of the audit report. It wasn't due to any errors or anything. It was just the auditors hadn't finished it in time for publication. So we thought that it would be, this information is really, really important and that it should get an appropriate public viewing. So therefore we decided when, and we didn't establish the time, but they're done every year, not always at the same time during the year, but when it does happen, we will have those audit reports and findings officially presented at a noticed, warned select board meeting. So there will be an honest, it won't be just kind of muddled in and buried in the town report at the end of the year. This will be something that gets a little bit more visibility. And then finally, we had some old tax provisions in the charter that had been officially repealed a long time ago, but yet they still appear in the charter itself. So, and that was, we used to have a special non-residential property tax, and we also had an inventory tax. Both have been repealed, and that took up a page or so and it had all the provisions for the repeal and the dates, how it would be phased out. All those things happened many, many years ago. No longer relevant, no longer needed in the charter. So those things were taken out. So as a result of removing a lot of unnecessary, duplicative things that were already listed in statute, we've actually reduced the size of the charter. I believe we've made it much more readable and understandable and more useful. And hopefully that will ultimately result in savings of time, savings of effort, and potentially savings of money. There is nothing in the charter that we've included that directly would cause an increase in costs to the town. So that concludes my presentation. Oh, okay. You want to?
Yeah, so obviously we did not rehearse this. So we're hoping, of course, that we've earned the voters' support on this article. If it is passed, then the next step is that it is submitted to the legislature. Now, Vermont is a Dillon state, which means the towns only have whatever powers that are designated to them by the state legislature. What that really means, in practical terms, is that the legislature will vote on this charter. They have the power and the authority to accept it as is, to reject it completely, or to accept it with modifications. And whatever they choose to do becomes becomes part of the charter, part of state law. It does not come back, if they do make modifications, it does not come back to us to revote. That's the way it is. So that would be the next step. And of course, the legislature is very busy, and we're not sure how long it would take them to act on our charter either. So even if we do pass it, it may not go into effect even for months or even till the next biennium, when the legislature is able to get it on the agenda and discuss it and vote on it up in Montpelier. So that would be the next step. If we don't get 25% participation, which I hope we do, or we don't pass it, then unfortunately we'd go into another 3-year hiatus before we could do a comprehensive revision again.
All right, thanks for the presentation. I'll open the floor to questions. I see, yes, who's that, Mike Martin?
Mr. Moderator?
Go ahead, sir.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Martone and Mr. Mobus. Wonderful presentation. In answer to, boy, we got some repeat going on. The charter that we're operating with right now was dated May 21st. So I'm assuming that the legislature did not take it up until May of that year. Just to give some clarity to Mr. Mobus's comments about the legislature taking action.
So your question is whether we adopted it on May 21st or whether that's when the legislature approved it? My guess is that that's when the legislature approved it, because I know we took this right from statute. So my best guess is that it was made effective.
Mr. Chair, back to the microphone, please.
Thank you for reminding us. Yes.
I would, if I had to take my best guess, and I didn't research this, but we started with the charter that was in state statute, that was adopted and approved and made effective by state statute. So I'm assuming that that May 21st, 1985 is the date that it was adopted by the legislature. Because if we did it during town meeting, it would have been March or something. It would have been the beginning of March. So this must have been the date that it was enacted by state statute.
Other questions or comments from anybody participating?
Moderator, I have a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morris.
And thank you. In Article 1, Roman numeral 5, which is ordinances, paragraph B, letter number 3, talks about ordinances adopted, amended, or repealed by act of the select board or by town meeting shall not be subject to permissive referendum, reconsideration, or I'm wondering if we could just talk. I had a question on that from a constituent. I'm wondering if we couldn't just explain a little bit what that is.
Mr. Marteau?
So this was something that was recommended to be put in by the attorney from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, who was consulting with us as we were doing it. And I'll just, instead of trying to, I'll just tell you specifically what they said, and why this was their reason for recommending it. They said, as presently constituted, the charter does not make explicit that ordinances acted upon by the select board are effective upon passage, which could lead to an interpretation or court ruling that they are subject to voter-backed permissive referendum. And what I understand that means is that this does not change the process that is currently in state statute that says you can get together a petition and you could request an ordinance be put on the ballot and voted on up or down at a special town meeting. That still stays in place. What this is saying is that that process does not automatically happen. An ordinance stands as approved by the select board unless you go through the process of getting together the petition, and you do it within a set time frame. So they continued on to say, this recommended change clarifies that regardless of the method used to adopt, amend, or repeal ordinances, that they will be effective upon passage and not subject to further action, which is consistent with state law. Furthermore, if ordinances were subject to reconsideration or rescission, the effect of doing so when they are otherwise effective upon passage is the creation of a regulatory window in which an ordinance may only be in effect for the short period of time between original passage and rescission at a subsequent duly warned annual or special town meeting. So again, doesn't change the process whereby if voters decide they don't like an ordinance that the select board has, they have, I'm not sure of the time period, they have
60 days.
60 days to get together a petition of a certain percentage of the voters. I think it's 5%, and then it gets put on a special town meeting and they can vote on it. That can still happen. What this is saying is that it doesn't automatically happen for every single ordinance that's approved. Was your clear enough?
Was your question answered, Mr. Morris?
Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Other questions or comments from participants? Seeing none, I want to thank the members of the Charter Review Committee who are here and on Zoom for their hard work preparing these revisions. And if there's no other discussion, this public hearing is adjourned. The ballot box will be open at 8 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, November 3rd, in Riverside.